Hey viewers, I'm joined by a very special guest tonight who reached out to me after seeing a video where I was first exploring the actually strange concept of making a vacuum balloon, a lighter than aircraft with no air. Josh has been researching the ideas of an aerogel-based balloon system for many years, and tonight he's going to explain what he's found, and let's go over how they might work. So Josh, vacuum balloons, what are they?
Hi, Simon. It's nice to be here with you.
Thank you.
Vacuum balloons are a concept that's been around for a while. It essentially is a rigid structure. The two most common shapes are spheres and rounded cylinders. The shell of the object acts as a vacuum chamber, holding a vacuum inside of it,
Right.
that is separated from the external pressure of the atmosphere. The fact that there's a vacuum in it, if the materials are light enough, can cause neutral buoyancy with the atmosphere. And if the materials are actually lighter than air, you can experience lift versus the atmosphere.
So many people have experimented with vacuum balloons. There's some fantastic black and white illustrations from different countries in the world. And of course, the best way to contain a vacuum back in the day would be by metal spheres or cylinders, as you said. But how on earth could you contain a vacuum with some material that is lighter than the craft? So the craft could be actually buoyant. And you've come across a material called aerogel. What's aerogel?
Aerogel is a material that was actually invented as far back as 1930. It's been developed by NASA through the years. It's also been worked on by the Department of Energy. Aerogel is a puffed material where it's partially empty space and partially silicon-based material for the earliest forms of aerogel. There are now alloys of aerogel called AIRLOYs that are stronger and provide more rigidity than the original aerogels.
So the original aerogels would be incredibly light, but incredibly fragile, and wouldn't have the possibility of having to be able to contain, say, a vacuum. So what happened next? Who was working on and who invented an idea of a material, an aerogel material that could actually contain a vacuum? And how does it work? I mean, it's a foam. Why doesn't air go rushing in? So tell me about a vacuum resisting aerogel. Who developed that?
So all aerogels actually resist vacuum in both directions. They're bidirectionally vacuum proof. It's easiest to describe this in the words of Dr. Marianne Meter, a research chemical engineer and team lead for aerogels at NASA's Glenn Research Center. She describes it as the pores of aerogel are so small and the gas phase heat conduction is also very poor. Because of these two combined facts in the material of aerogel, molecules of air cannot pass through the material as they are simply bigger than the empty spaces that are left in the material itself.
Oh, clever material science. But the aerogel would have to be structurally strong enough to actually maintain a structure that wasn't crushed by the atmospheric pressure.
Yeah, I've mentioned in my previous comment that there's a material called AIRLOYs, and instead of forming a basic silica aerogel, they produce an alloy that has the interior spaces of the aerogel coated with a polymer. The polymer then acts to rigidify the aerogel material itself while maintaining all of its other properties: heat resistance, low weight.
Fantastic. So
if you maintains rigidity.
So if you got a sphere of this, which no doubt could be produced and evacuated as a vacuum, what would be the characteristics if you let go of a sphere of this alloy aerogel with an evacuated interior? What would it do?
If I make a sphere of aerogel, a shell that has a hollow area on the inside for a vacuum, and draw a vacuum in the aerogel bubble, when I let it go, it'll rise up on its own with no power required, no fuel required, and I believe that this has already been done by the US government. There is a document on the OSTI's public internet that describes spherical shell vacuum vessels that have already been produced by the Department of Energy.
Wow. Oh, that's a very, I'm getting it. So it's a vacuum balloon that it has a structure which is strong enough to retain, to not be crushed by air pressure. And no doubt it would, its buoyancy from sea level to altitude could be controlled by the level of the vacuum. So you could, in fact, have a vertically stable sphere that you could, by altering its pressure, it could hover at exactly the kind of altitudes. And maybe I'm intrigued to know what kind of speed it would change. How fast it would accelerate between these loitering at. Oh, it's mind blowing. And yeah, of course, you could use it as a long duration drone if it could also contain some lightweight electronics. Do you think people are working on that?
I can prove that people are working on this. The research papers are documented on public websites. We've backed them up to archive servers. I work with a research group known as Korea UFO. We've done a lot of this research together, and we've found the patents that describe the parts of these craft. We have a reasonable understanding of how those patents work together to form the spherical drones that are currently seen in the air around the world.
That are currently seen in the air. Oh, you're teasing me. Oh, that's fantastic. And no doubt this patent, if it's published, or the physics or the material science of the concept, isn't necessarily just NATO or the United States. It's probably international. I can well imagine China, who has a long history of working with lighter than aircraft, would be interested in aerogel vacuum balloons.
Yeah, we have proof that we've found that shows that China started their aerogels research program in 2011. There are research papers that have been published in China about a material known as graphene aerogel. It is the lightest by volume aerogel that can also resist a vacuum in both directions. The research paper that was released by China also contained a link to the funding of the research, which showed that China initiated their R&D project on aerogel in 2011. Curiously, 2011 is also the year that Aerogel Technologies in the United States released their public information about their advances in aerogels and airloys.
So let's just make this very clear that what you're telling me is all in the public domain. It's released public domain information, which you and your group have squirreled into and are disclosing stuff that people have chosen to put out. So no doubt there's more secret dark stuff, but you tonight are saying what anybody with a good research background could find.
Correct. We've been researching this for quite some time. I myself have been researching the UFO phenomenon for over a decade. We've been looking into aerogels on the side for about the same time. But earlier in the year, we realized that the two were linked. And once we found our first proof, the pieces kept falling into place and falling into place. And I believe that we fully understand what is going on now.
Oh, you've just opened a very interesting can of worms there, Josh. So you're saying that possibly some so-called UFO UAP sightings could be a currently semi-secret or very funded and interesting technology into aerogel vacuum balloons. What would a military or a nation use a lighter than air vacuum aerogel sphere for? I mean, what would be its application?
I believe that the spheres are being used as recon drones right now. They require no power and no fuel and can indefinitely stay suspended in the air column at neutral buoyancy.
Right.
You can attach a camera to the outside of the sphere. I believe there's actually 6 cameras, one pointing up, one pointing down, pointing out in each of the 4 directions. That would give you full visual coverage from that single drone. We've also found patents for a mesh network of drones that communicate between themselves. So I believe multiple spherical recon drones are able to form a visual network over a wide area by being left to disperse in the air column, spread themselves out as a mesh, and form a full surveillance.
Right. They would need some power source for the electronics on board. But
the electronics can be powered with a solar cell attached to the outside of the drone.
With limited
I believe that these are the sphere
storage,
in a cube that are being seen by Ryan Graves, who testified to Congress about this exact issue.
Right. So we've definitely had reports in Congress specifically talking about spheres inside cubes, and also we've had the Mosul sphere, which exactly fits what you're just saying. And very strangely, we've had Commander Fravor seeing a Tic Tac. Now, Tic Tac is exactly the other shape that you described, which would be like a pressurized tank, a lozenge shape. Did that demonstrate some of the maneuvering capabilities of a vacuum aerogel balloon?
I believe that the large spheres seen near Eglin Air Force Base and reported to Matt Gates were also advancements of this technology, a scaling up of the small spheres to a bigger sphere that could then fly in a diamond pattern with 4 other piloted AI drones.
Oh, right. So this network idea. But going back to the so-called Tic Tac sighting off the coast of San Diego in the Pacific, that's quite a while ago now. So could that have existed? Could that be a vacuum aerogel balloon device? Not a sphere, but a Tic Tac shape, going back to the date that Fravor saw it?
If you have the sphere, you then scale up to the rounded cylinder. I believe what they actually did is build the Tic Tac in a large gas pressure vessel, similar to a propane tank that you would see at a gas station where you would fill up your smaller barbecue tank.
Right.
They would fill that with aerogel precursors, build a Tic Tac inside of the large propane vessel, and then equip it with pumps, with intakes, with exhausts, with electronics, such that it could be turned into a vacuum drone as well. I believe this technology was, again, as I said, done by Triad National Services LLC, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and the Department of Energy. I believe that when they made this advancement in the technology from spheres to the Tic Tac, they decided that they needed to do a test of it. They then looked for the best conventional pilot within the US Armed Forces, which at the time would have been Commander David Fravor.
Absolutely.
And unbeknownst to Commander Fravor, I believe that Triad, the DOE, and LANL set up a test to see if the best conventional pilot would be able to see this new tic-tac shaped drone. When Commander Fravor saw it and asked for tasking to go and investigate, he went down towards the drone. They realized that he was able to see it,
right,
vented the pressure from the internal tank, and it would have incredibly shot up in the atmosphere so fast that it would be there 1 second and gone the next second up into the air, so fast that neither he nor the other pilot, Dietrich, would have been able to see it.
So it fits the whole description where Commander Fravor says that it behaved in a way that didn't fit with any technology that he knew about, because he didn't know about it. And I've often
None of us did.
Right, it was pretty secret. And hang on, they're testing it in a military operational advanced weapon area. And as you say, Fravor actually trains the best Navy pilots. I'd never thought of it. Why wasn't it some junior pilot with an F-18? Commander Fravor's the creme of la creme of pilots. So you think it was actually a test, and so to see how he would react to it, how psychologically he would react to it. And so you believe that his reports of what he saw are accurate?
Yeah, I believe that his testimony, both on his original Joe Rogan podcast and his testimony to Congress, are consistent. I believe that they're also consistent with the craft that I'm describing. We've released diagrams. We've released a document on our Twitter feed that describes these craft in detail. It links to the patents. It shows where the budgeting came from. I believe that we've answered this question. It is not aliens.
Going back to the practicality of how it works, because I think if we could nail it actually being a physical object. So I can see it loitering at any altitude with differential pressure. I can also imagine, but I would want to kind of see it and look at some physics of how it would accelerate vertically. But how on earth does it move laterally? Does it have any kind of lateral propulsion? And some of the sightings that David Fravor and others have said on the tic-tac shaped object was they look like antenna or protrusions coming from one side of it, maybe on the base. Do you know anything about them?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, going up and down is a relatively easy matter of changing the internal pressure of the vacuum chamber versus the outside pressure of the atmosphere or the water. These craft can actually enter the water and suck water into their vacuum chamber and expel water to rise in water and in air as well. I believe that how they move in directions other than up and down is by sucking air into an air intake with a pump and then expelling the air through a vector thrust pump.
The two nozzles.
Yeah, similar to a Harrier jump jet. At least one of the nozzles can be rotated such that it can expel the air pressure from inside, or that it is constantly drawing in to provide thrust. I believe there's even an example of this. There is a 2014 video that was released by Leslie Kane. It shows a Chilean helicopter encountering an unknown object that was hovering. The object was not visible to the visual spectrum, but did show up to their infrared camera on their helicopter. The object in question expels a plume of dark material behind it, which I believe to be colder than air gas that was inside of it before.
It's a FLIR image,
Yeah, after expelling the gas on the FLIR, as described by physics, the craft starts to move forwards.
So why aren't we visually, as members of the public all over the world, seeing these network of drone spheres everywhere? How on earth could you mask their visual signatures? You know, they'd be quite obvious, wouldn't they?
I believe these are relatively scarce still in number. I don't think that we've made a whole ton of these. I think they're using the same ones over and over. They would be used in the most important areas for them to be used. If there was a training zone and you deployed a bunch of spheres in a mesh recon network, they would allow a operator back at the base to use a VR headset to have a real-time view of what is going on in that training area so that they can evaluate pilot performance, etc. The final thing is we actually found a patent that claims the craft are coated with a photon absorbing layer of black silicon. I leave this up to your viewers to determine if they believe that based on the patents, but the patent exists and is consistent with drones that have been seen.
Well, I can help on that because in Imperial College in London, this person has invented a metamaterial. Metamaterial is a material that interferes with different frequencies. An early metamaterial would be rubber that's coated around submarines that can absorb sonar sound. A more sophisticated metamaterial can absorb microwave energy, the stealth skin of stealth airplanes. It's literally, it's almost like an aerogel. Some of its early incarnations was actually horribly fragile, but it's now become stronger, so it needs less maintenance. Early stealth fighters had to be babied. Today, the metamaterial has quantum leaped into optical frequencies. So if you could make a metamaterial that actually, it doesn't absorb, that's the most important thing to know, it redirects. So if light, photons go into a material, into a maze of convoluted, faceted, just the right frequency stuff, it doesn't come back out again. There's no reflection. So yeah, tanks are being coated in it. It obviously works better at night because if it's absorbing all light and not reflecting it, it appears black. Although I think you can probably change the color. But imagine if you had a light absorbing skin on a drone in the air against a dark background, it's gone.
Yeah, there's not many photons at light, and as you said, when those not many photons are scattered, that's even less of the object that you can see. What you describe is incredibly consistent with the patent that we found. And it's also consistent with the sightings that we've seen and are recorded on the internet.
Wow, it's very, very interesting. As an idea of a technology, I'm immediately thinking, my question to you about moving it laterally, you don't really need to. Imagine you could pop these out of submarines, like bloop, and it just goes up. And all you need to do is place them in maybe a few kilometer distance and make, as you say, a network over a battlefield, over an area of surveillance. And you can get rid of them as well. Boom, they've gone. You know, they would make long loitering, invisible, networked surveillance drones. And the other thing that I've discovered is one of the weakest links of drones that a lot of people have worked on with encrypted radio signals is sending the signal from the drone back down to Earth to a ground station. Forget that. That doesn't happen anymore. The signal goes up. So all these signals are being picked up by a satellite network, which then collects synthetic aperture radar stuff, and then can send it down as a single encrypted beam. So it stops anybody eavesdropping on what these drones. The drones have no RF signature from the ground because it's all going up. Have you seen anything about data transmission from these types of drones?
It's exactly as you described. There is a patent for this procedure that is assigned to Los Alamos National Laboratory, the same place that has been making these drones. It describes a mesh network of several space-based or atmosphere-based drones that are used together to interconnect. They communicate with each other, and they can also send signals, as you described, up to a satellite.
Sure. Here in Europe, Airbus Industries, who are obviously a big defense contractor, as well as building very nice airplanes down the road from us in Toulouse, have actually, I can't believe they actually chose this name, actually for European defense, have built Skynet. Why did they choose it? Call it Skynet, which is a satellite network for receiving synthetic aperture radar images and then being able to send it down to specific headquarters where they're decoded. So this definitely happens. Oh,
I believe that it does. I believe that this is also being used as a lie to the general public. And I believe that it goes back quite a while too. We've been tracing this backwards in its chronology. That they didn't just start with a spherical drone. The aerogel came from somewhere, and it looks like it goes back as far as 1930.
But you're not just aerogel, but you're talking about non-gas permeable aerogel.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. That's the quantum leap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a man named Kistler in 1930. And curiously, that's the same year that Einstein and Szilard invented a refrigeration device that required no moving parts. I believe that if you take a refrigerating device that has no moving parts and apply that to a pump that contains aerogel on the inside, you can actually form a vacuum pump with no moving parts that requires minimal power. Simply heating up the aerogel will cause air to be drawn into the pump.
Yeah, you've got that immense, you're using natural resources of air pressure with exotic material to actually make something work without burning oil. It's a fantastic idea. So do you think aerogel has other potential uses? Obviously, it seems to be funded and in the domain of militaries throughout the world. But do you see this aerogel vacuum balloon or containment of differential pressure as being beneficial outside of the military?
I've put forth an idea on our Korea UFO public Twitter that actually describes a method of turning this technology into energy. And I understand that this is going to sound like an extraordinary claim, but I believe that this technology leads to free energy, and I would like scientists and the public to challenge what I'm saying. I want this to push forwards so that it's not hidden and sequestered within a secret part of the government. Nothing I've done is illegal. This information is all on the public internet. I have not exposed any atomic secrets. These items do not radiate any energy. They do not require any energy. It is simply materials science being exploited in novel ways.
and internationally. So we're not fingering one particular nation as keeping this to themselves. It's obviously a technology which is out there, which could be exploited by many nations of the world. And it's very interesting to know the physics, the mechanics of how it works. Josh, I think that you have introduced a fantastic subject. And I think what we'll do is end it here today and come back and talk about other applications and other stuff that we probably have missed, and answer viewers' questions. Be polite, be civil. Josh and his group have done a lot of work into this. I'm new to it, but from what I hear today from Josh, it sounds very likely. I mean, I can hear you all screaming that Commander Fravas saw a flying saucer. Well, maybe he saw an aerogel drone. Let's be open-minded. Let's actually look at what's out there and learn. Thank you.